Hey guys, this is Fiction Life. How are you all? Please support to subscribe this channel for watching new interesting stories. So in this video we will see second part, what if Harry Potter was freed from Dumbledore's control. But before we start, if you want more stuff like this, then be sure to subscribe and like this video. And if possible, share this video with your friends. Now let's start the story. Here is short summary. When Bill Weasley repays his debt to Harry, he unknowingly sets Harry free, from the Dursleys, from Dumbledore's control, and from the darkness within. A new summer, a new destiny, and a truly free Harry Potter begins. But before we start, if you want more stuff like this, then be sure to subscribe and like this video. And if possible, share this video with your friends. Now let's start the story. Bill entered Snape's office. Snape ignored him before looking up. It was obvious to see that Snape had been expecting a student, not an adult wizard. "Weasley, what are you going here?" Snape said by way of greeting. "Good to see you, too, Professor. Mind if I have a seat? I've come to negotiate with you on behalf of one of my Gringotts clients." Snape raised an eyebrow at him. He waved the man into a seat and said, "Go on. I have a client who needs a basilisk rendered. It is rather large and might take some time. He is prepared to offer you 3% of the proceeds as payment," Bill said, getting straight to the point. "A basilisk, you say? There haven't been fresh basilisk parts on the market for several years. The proceeds will be quite lucrative, 5% and 2% of the parts for my personal stores." Bill shook his head. "This basilisk is over 30 meters long and 3 meters wide. 3% and 1% of the parts for your personal stores." Snape stared at him for a moment, then spat out, "Potter." Bill raised his eyebrows. "I know the story the whelp has been spreading around. There's no way the beast was that large. 4% and 2% of the parts for my personal stores. I've seen it. It is that large. 4% and 1% for your personal stores. Another 1% of the parts for the school stores." Snape thought for a moment. The school stores were his personal stores. He decided to agree. "Agreed. With the caveat that the brat helps me with the rendering. I'll need someone to hold bottles and bags while I work." Bill thought for a moment, then agreed. "Very well, as long as Harry agrees." Snape scoffed. "The boy will do as he's told. He should have been expelled for destroying school property, not rewarded with proceeds for his destructive behavior. You know the law as well as I do. The slayer is the owner. That's just how it is." Snape sneered at Bill's words but didn't argue. "Harry," Bill called. Harry opened the door and slipped inside. Bill removed the contracts and began filling in the relevant parts. "Harry, Snape has asked for you to help with the rendering. I hope you'll agree. It'll be a good learning experience." "What will I tell people I'm doing?" Harry asked, reluctant to agree to spending any more time than was necessary with Snape. "You can tell them you have detention with me for destroying school property," Snape said with a nasty smile. Harry gave Bill a pleading look. Bill gave him a stern look in return. "All right, I'll do it." Harry frowned as he replied. Snape ignored him. They had just finished signing the documents when Snape's flow flared to life. "Severus, come quickly. It's the headmaster." A distraught Poppy Pomfrey shouted into the room. She noticed Bill and said, "Please, come as well, Bill. You might be able to help." Snape didn't waste any time in rushing to the fireplace and running through. Bill was hot on his heels. Harry didn't want to be left out, so he rushed after them and slid through the fireplace right before the connection closed. It was bedlam in the hospital wing. Dumbledore was screaming, being held down on a hospital bed by Hagrid, who was sobbing. Poppy was shouting instructions at two house elves, who were trying desperately to help her. Severus was shouting to be heard over the din. Bill grabbed Poppy and shook her. "Tell us what's going on, Poppy. We can't help if we don't know what's wrong." Poppy was trying to catch her breath and trying not to cry at the same time. She was barely coherent. "The ring. Cursed. His hand. Don't know. Can't stop it. So much pain. Can't help." She lost her battle to keep her tears at bay. Severus and Bill must have gotten enough out of that to understand some of what was happening. They both crowded around where a Dumbledore in pain was being held down by a wailing Hagrid. They both started casting spells at once. "A wasting curse," Severus said. "We'll have to amputate," Bill responded. "I know a potion that might help, but I'll have to make it. Go. I'll hold it off as long as I can." With that Severus literally ran from the room. "Poppy!" Bill shouted. "Come here. We have to amputate the arm." "No," wailed Dumbledore. "Not my wand arm. We'll have to stun him," Bill said urgently. "There's not much time. If it gets to his shoulder, he's a goner." Dumbledore got a burst of strength from somewhere. He shoved Hagrid away and stood. He grabbed his wand from somewhere and brandished it at Bill. "I won't let you," bellowed Dumbledore. He started to move his wand to shoot off something nasty. Harry wasn't going to let anyone hurt Bill. Bill had done so much for him. He was like a brother to Harry. A beloved big brother. Just as Bill sent off a stunner, Harry sent off an Expelliarmus. Both spells hit the old man at the same time. He went flying back and his wand went flying out of his hand towards Harry. Harry caught the wand in midair. He felt a surge of magic as the wand heated in his arm and sent multicolored sparks flying out of the end. There was no time to worry about what happened. Everyone else in the room was crouched over Dumbledore. Harry shoved the wand in his pocket with his cloak and moved forward. "Help me get him back on the bed, Hagrid," Bill said, hurriedly. Hagrid moved to comply. "Get ready, Poppy. I'll do the severing charm. You do the cauterization. At the same time, we have to stop the infected blood from flowing." The crying woman nodded. She took a deep breath to try to get herself under control. Despite her emotional state, her wand was steady. "Move his arm so it's held out straight, Hagrid. Don't get in the way of these spells," Bill warned. "I don't know," Dumbledore said. Bill cut off the distraught man. "If you want him to live, you'll help us," Bill said grimly. Hagrid didn't hesitate any longer. Harry stared in morbid fascination as Bill and Poppy cast their spells almost simultaneously. Dumbledore's arm loped right off without a drop of blood being spilled. Poppy started casting spells frantically. Hagrid burst out into renewed sobs. Dumbledore groaned despite the stunner. The black continued to spread up the severed arm. "Harry," Bill said urgently. Harry rushed forward. Bill picked up the severed arm. "I recognize this ring," he whispered. "It's one of the Horcruxes. It won't stop until it's destroyed. Hurry. Take it to the chamber. 3 drops of venom should do. You know how to milk a snake of its venom." Harry nodded. They had done this many times in potions class. "Go, hurry. 3 drops should do." He grabbed Harry's arm. "Don't let the venom touch you. Go, now." Harry grabbed the arm and ran. He ran so far so fast, he felt his lungs would explode. When he made it to Myrtle's bathroom, he threw himself through the hole head first. He wasn't sure where he'd gotten the breath to speak the word to open the chamber. The tunnel seemed to take forever to slide down. Harry landed with an oomph at the bottom. He jumped up and ran again. He slammed into the final door blocking the chamber shut. He shouted the Parseltongue words to open the chamber and ran inside. He skidded to a stop in front of the basilisk's mouth. He forced it open and aimed well. Gently, he massaged the gums above one of the giant fangs and venom began to drip out. He adjusted his grip to make certain the drops fell on the ring. Holes opened up where the venom dripped on the rapidly cooling arm. A horrific scream began to echo around the chamber as the 3rd drop fell on the ring. Harry had only heard anything like it once before in his life. It was in this very chamber when Harry had stabbed the diary with the basilisk fang. The sound seemed to go on forever. Harry just kept on dripping venom on the thing until the sound stopped. A huge crack appeared in the face of the stone set into the ring. When it finally did, Harry ran to the flowing water on the floor and dipped the arm in. It cleansed the venom off of the hand. Harry ripped the ring from the half-dissolved finger and threw it in his pocket. He wasn't sure if Bill would need it again. He threw the dead arm on the ground and pulled his broom from his pocket. He resized the broom and jumped on it. He shoved his hand in his pocket and put the ring inside. It was the same pocket that held the wand and the cloak. Harry didn't even notice the surge of magic nor the heat that emanated from the pocket, followed by a deathly cold. He was too busy focusing on getting back to the hospital wing. Harry burst out of the opening to the chamber. He barely paused to close it before speeding off down the hallway. He didn't get off his broom. He took the corners and stairways at breakneck speed. Thankfully, he didn't run into anyone. He slammed to a stop outside the hospital wing, jumped off the broom, and ran inside. He was just in time to see Snape force a sickly yellow potion down the headmaster's unresponsive throat. "Did you do it?" Bill asked him. Harry nodded. He couldn't speak yet. He needed to catch his adrenaline-fueled breath first. Good. It's in fate's hands now. They stood watching the headmaster for a few moments. Color returned to his checks. The black spider web pattern did not spread up what remained of his arm onto his chest. Everyone let out a collective sigh of relief. Hagrid and Poppy stopped crying, though they were both still wiping their noses. A half-hour went by and the headmaster's condition didn't change, which was a good sign. I think we stopped it in time, Bill said calmly. Severus agreed. There's nothing we can do now. Hagrid, stay with him. I shall return to check on him later. I had better go, too, Bill said. Please keep me informed as to how he's doing, Poppy. The Medowitch nodded. Harry. Harry turned to Bill, who motioned with his head for Harry to follow him. Well, that was exciting. He said when they were alone again. I hate to do it, but we still need to get the diadem from the come and go room. Harry looked at Bill dubiously. I know, Bill said, sounding shaky. I don't want to worry about it right now either, but I have to get back to Egypt and I need to take that thing with me. Come on, I'll show you how the room works. Harry followed Bill up to the 7th floor. Now that Dumbledore knew he was here, Bill wasn't trying to hide his presence anymore. They arrived at the blank stretch of wall across from the portrait of Barnabas the Barmy, teaching trolls ballet. Harry gave the portrait a strange look, then turned his strange look onto Bill. Bill was pacing in front of the blank wall. Suddenly, a door appeared. Harry gasped. There were many strange things at Hogwarts, but invisible rooms were a new one to him. You have to pace back and forth 3 times in front of this stretch of wall while thinking of what you want to find, Bill said with a small grin. He opened the door with a flourish. Inside was a giant room that went on as far as the eye could see. It was covered wall to wall with junk. Some of it was relatively nice stuff. Some of it was old and broken. Some of it was just plain old, but it was still fascinating to see. Bill looked out into the room a little dejectedly. It's bigger than I remembered. It's going to take us forever to find the diadem in this. What if we called Dobby and Twinkie to help? Harry suggested. The elves were great at finding things. Good idea, Harry. Do you mind calling them? Harry called for the elves. They immediately appeared. They looked around the room in wonder. What cans we be doing for you, sirs? Dobby asked. Is we to be cleaning this room? Twinkie asked with a manic gleam in her eyes. No, Harry said, emphatically. We need you to help us find something. Bill, can you show them? Bill nodded. He pulled the parchment out of his pocket. He showed the elves the image of the diadem on the ugly bust. We're looking for this, Bill said. The elves nodded. Yes, Mr. Bill. We cans be helping yous find it. With that, the 4 split up and started searching. It took almost 2 hours of searching before Dobby shouted. I thinks I be finding it, Mr. Bill. Please come see. Dobby's voice echoed in the cavern. Bill shouted in the void. Send up sparks, Dobby. We'll all come to you. Dobby sent up blue sparks. Within 15 minutes, all of the group had assembled in front of an ugly bust on top of a broken-looking cabinet. A tarnished bronze diadem with deep blue gems sat on top. That's it, shouted Harry excitedly. He was so glad the searching was over. He was exhausted from the adrenaline crash from earlier. He just wanted to go back to his trunk and go to sleep. That it is, Bill said just as excitedly. He carefully levitated it into a magic null bag and put it back in his pocket. He would be much more careful about touching the Horcruxes after he saw what happened to Dumbledore's arm. We can go now, Bill said tiredly. Harry was already heading for the door when Twinkie called out. Wait. If all this stuff is being junk no one wants, could Dobby and I be staying and going through it? There is being many used bookses in here. Mr. Remus asked Dobby and Twinkie to always be on the lookout for used bookses. Yes, Dobby piped up. There might be being other treasures that is being valuable in here, too. Goblins is being teaching Dobby to always look for unwanted treasures for his master. Could we please? Bill laughed. Have at it. No one wants the stuff in here. You can search to your heart's content. Is there being anything you wants Dobby and Twinkie to be looking for you, Mr. Bill? Twinkie asked, solicitous. If you come across any dragonhide clothes, I'd love those, but otherwise no. This cabinet is being broken, but it is a door that opens somewhere else. It is not being safe here in Hogwarts. Twinkie said, wrinkling her nose at the cabinet the bust had been sitting on. Bill blinked. We can't have that, he said. He cast a quick blasting hex on the cabinet and it exploded into dust. There. Now, I'm heading out. Come on, Harry. I'll walk you back to the tower and say hello to the kids. Bill and Harry walked back to Gryffindor Tower. Bill popped in to say hello to his brothers and sister. Harry waited around to see him out. It only took a few minutes until Harry and Bill were back in Harry's travel trunk, safely in Harry's dorm room. Bill took the flow and left back for Padfoot and Remus Place. Harry said a quick goodbye, then, as soon as Bill was gone, headed for his room. He didn't even think of the treasures in his pocket. Truth be told, he'd already forgotten completely about them. He left them in the pocket of his robe, which he threw in his bedroom floor. Twinkie found the robe the next morning. She moved the wand and the ring into the bottom drawer of Harry's bedside table and put his invisibility cloak on the hook beside the door. The wand and the ring stayed forgotten about until well after Dumbledore got what was coming to him. Albus Dumbledore slept for 3 days before he awoke with a start. The trauma of being cursed by the blasted ring came rushing back to him. He reached over and felt his arm was gone. He sat up with a start. It really was gone. He searched for his wand next. It was gone. The ring was gone, too. He had to find them. He was so close. He had recognized the ring for what it was the moment he had found it under the floorboard in the back bedroom of the Gaunt Shack. The stone in the ring was the Resurrection Stone. Dumbledore already owned the Elder Wand. He could easily get the cloak back from the Potter brat. Then, he would have finally accomplished his lifelong dream of becoming the Lord of Death. The Deathly Hallows were all three within his grasp, but now he'd lost them. He was still in the hospital wing. He shouted for Poppy. She came bustling over. Albus, don't stress yourself so. Let me check you over. She didn't wait for a by your leave. She just started casting. She sighed in relief. You're all right, thank heavens. Are you in pain? She asked him. No, you daft woman. I'm missing my arm. My wand arm. With my ring on it. My wand is also gone. Where are they? I want them back. Oh, I'm sorry, Albus. They've all been destroyed. Your wand must have still been in your hand when we amputated the arm. I'm so sorry, she said with tears in her eyes. She had seen this before. People who were amputees needed to grieve their lost appendage. They often focused on unimportant details like jewelry or clothing. It was part of the shock of the loss. They couldn't have. How did they destroy them? They were indestructible. I'm not completely sure, but they said they used some kind of venom. Basilisk, I think. No. Albus cried out in grief. Not basilisk venom. Call Severus. I must speak to him. In his distraught state, Albus couldn't think of anyone who could have access to basilisk venom other than Severus. Albus had completely forgotten Bill was even present during his trauma. He never knew Harry was there at all. Severus arrived a few short minutes later. Poppy let him in. It's the trauma. He's in shock. Just assure him it's gone and there's nothing we can do to bring it back. He needs to accept it so he can grieve and begin to heal, she whispered to the cranky potions professor. He had been wrist-deep in some of his new basilisk parts. Do you have basilisk venom, Severus? Dumbledore asked urgently. He wasn't thinking clearly through his panic. Severus blinked. Severus assumed the man knew that Harry was selling off the parts to the basilisk he'd killed. Yes, Severus said slowly, drawing out the word. Is it gone? Is it really gone? The man asked desperately. Severus looked as sympathetic as he was capable of, which wasn't very sympathetic at all. Yes, he said firmly, assuming the headmaster meant his arm. Can't you get it back? It can't be destroyed. Dumbledore meant the ring and his wand, but he wasn't making much sense. Severus thought Dumbledore meant his arm. No, it's gone. It was destroyed completely. We can't get it back, he said. Sternly. But Severus, my wand. Severus thought the man was complaining about using his non-dominant hand to perform magic. It is a setback, but you'll just have to learn to use the other. Dumbledore thought the man meant his other wand. The wand he owned before he won the Elder Wand from Gellert. But it won't be the same. Dumbledore wailed. I think he needs a calming draft, Poppy mumbled to herself. She was so distraught she accidentally grabbed Dreamless Sleep instead. No, it won't be, but you will adjust. You are a powerful wizard. You must learn to go on, Severus said, without pity. If Alistair Moody could continue catching dark wizards with a peg leg, then Albus Dumbledore could learn to lead Bratz and Politic without his wand arm. Poppy shoved the dreamless sleep potion into Dumbledore's gaping mouth. He wanted to argue more but he couldn't. He passed out before he could say any more. "Oh, dear. I think I gave him the wrong one," she said, worriedly. Severus just shook his head, turned on his heel, and left the hospital wing. Ted Tonks was a happy man. He was proud of his family name but he was also proud to now be considered a Potter. Doors were opening for him that had been shut to a no-name Muggleborn. One door that was easily opened for him now was the door to Amelia Bones. Newt Scamander had contacted Ted 2 days ago saying he was ready to testify as to Hagrid's innocence about the opening of the Chamber of Secrets. Rather than getting on the docket and waiting months for a trial date, Ted was now able to give Amelia a fire call and ask for a meeting. That's right, Amelia. Ted was now on a first-name basis with the head of the DMLE. Amelia had cleared out her morning schedule after a very short 2-day wait and then Ted was in. Himself, Newt, and Hagrid had strolled right in for tea. Hagrid told the sorry tale of his railroading. Newt testified as to the nature and age of the basilisk, as well as the nature and age of the acromantula that supposedly petrified multiple students and killed another. Ted testified and provided proof of who Tom Riddle really was, namely Voldemort, and it was done. Fanny's your aunt and Hagrid's name and record were cleared before lunch. The lovable brute even got reparations in the sum total of 100 galleons. He tried to pay Ted but Ted refused. He explained that he was on retainer for Harry Potter. Hagrid had burst into tears about good old Harry, always doing what was right and good. Ted couldn't help but agree. He'd explained to Hagrid that Harry had already arranged for a tutor to help Hagrid achieve his owls. Once that was done, Hagrid would be a fully qualified wizard. He had the right to a wand right away, of course, but he wouldn't be able to freely use it until he'd gained his owl qualifications. He'd treated Newt and Hagrid to lunch, where they had bonded over loving deadly creatures. Ted left them to it and headed back to the office to share the good news. He fire-called his new favorite cousin, Padfoot, as soon as he got back to the office. "Good news, Padfoot. Hagrid's name is cleared. He's ready to begin tutoring as soon as your Remus is ready to start training him." "Good luck with that, I say," Ted finished, cheerfully. "Did you hear that, Remus?" Padfoot barked. "Hagrid's in the clear. You can start training him up as soon as you like." Remus budged Padfoot over and sunk down next to the fire, as well. "Is he truly? I would have expected it to take more time than that." Newt Scamander's testimony was accepted without question. Amelia took care of the whole thing personally. "It's a done deal," Ted said with a grin. "Glad the wheels of justice can turn quickly for someone," Padfoot said, sarcastically. Ted nodded in sympathy. "Too right, friend. I can't stick around. Just wanted to let you know. You'll let Bill and Harry know, won't you?" Ted asked. "We will," Remus answered. "Thanks for letting us know. I'll send Hagrid and all to set things up." "You do that. I think he was going to go buy a new wand today," Ted replied. He said his goodbyes and whistled as he worked for the remainder of the day. Albus Dumbledore was furious. Things were getting out of hand. Not only had he lost 60% of the profits from his Harry Potter franchise, but he had also lost the rights to write any more books or put out any more products. To make matters even worse, he'd lost the Deathly Hallows when he'd been so close to reuniting them. He'd lost his plan to have Harry confront Voldemort this year. To top it all, he'd lost control of his gamekeeper. Somehow, while Dumbledore was sleeping off the loss of his arm, Hagrid's name had been cleared and he'd been reinstated as a wizard in good standing. The man had even managed to find himself a tutor and was working towards his owls as we speak. Charlie Weasley had already reached out to the man about a spot on the Dragon Preserve when he was through. There would be no stopping Hagrid now, Dumbledore fumed. He had to get things back under his control. He needed a new way to put Harry in Tom Riddle's path again this year. He had just the plan to do it, too. He stared morosely at his plain, old pine wood and phoenix feather wand, held in his left hand. What he liked to call his sad hand. He'd have to learn many of his impressive magics all over again, now that he would need to do the wand movements backwards and without the powerful Elder Wand. He knew the wand was gone because he couldn't feel any connection to it anymore. Of course, he didn't know Harry Potter had won the wand's allegiance by disarming him, but it wouldn't have mattered if he did. The wand was gone to him. Instead, Dumbledore would have to focus on his new plan. He knew exactly where Slytherin's locket, one of Voldemort's remaining Horcruxes, was located. It was at the Black House in London. It would be hard to get in, no doubt, but Dumbledore was determined. He knew just who he'd give it to, too. Susan Bones. Amelia needed to pay for stealing away Albus, gamekeeper and loyal stooge. Yes, all he needed to do was get the locket. Bill Weasley was feeling pretty good about himself. He was doing great at his job, which was his life's passion. He had been earning consultant fees out the wahoo. He had cracked one of the tombs at the Pyramid Complex of Unis. He had even gotten to watch the death match between Harnock and Agrot. Harnock won and was even well enough afterwards to celebrate the victory and keep working, a miracle in and of itself. Best of all, Bill had just made a nice 2.5% commission, half of the 5% commission paid to Gringotts, off of the sale of the basilisk Harry had slain. 75,000 galleons richer looked good on Bill Weasley. Best of all, Gringotts was happy with him as an employee. That was rare for a wizard to achieve. Bill looked at the time. It was 7 p.m. in Scotland right now. He decided to call Harry and give him the good news. "Hey, Harry," Bill said, as soon as Harry answered. "How are things?" Harry grinned at Bill's good mood. "Good, Bill. But not as good as you, obviously. How are you?" "I'm fantastic. I just left the basilisk auction." "You are a very lucky man." Harry looked intrigued. "Oh really? How much did it go for?" 3 million galleons. Your percentage is 1.5 million galleons, plus 10% of the basilisk parts, as requested." "No way. That's amazing, Bill," Harry said enthusiastically. "What will Ron, Ginny, and Hermione get?" "Well, with 7 victims, including Filch's cat, Ing Myrtle, and Ginny, and Ron as co-conspirator, they'll get 75,000 galleons each. I've got to tell Ron. He'll flip." Harry crowed. Bill laughed. "That he will. I bet he's never even dreamed of having that kind of money." "Well, maybe he's dreamed of it, but now he'll actually have it." "When will the funds be available to them?" "They already are. I set up vaults for each of the victims with their share in it. I'll contact the rest of the victims this week. Ron, Ginny, and Hermione should get their keys tomorrow. Mum will probably make Ron and Ginny save most of theirs, but that's for the best." "Yeah, probably," Harry agreed. "Will you help me order the brooms for the school?" "Yeah, no problem. I'll contact Nimbus for the Quidditch brooms and Clean Sweep for the school brooms." "How's that sound? We can get Ted to present the brooms and the trust for the school as soon as the brooms are ready." "That's perfect," Harry said, grinning from ear to ear. He couldn't wait to see the looks on everyone's faces. "Can you have him come during dinner? I want to see everyone's faces." Bill laughed. "That shouldn't be a problem. Snape will get his key tomorrow, too. Watch his face to see how he reacts. He's getting 120,000 galleons. He might just quit." "That would be a dream come true," Harry chuckled. "How are things going with the—" Harry looked around to make sure no one was nearby. "Horcrux hunting?" "Stalled, I'm afraid. We only have 2 more to go. The snake and the locket. I'm not sure where the locket is and I'm not sure how to find the snake. All I know is it's in Valbone Forest in Albania. I'm not sure how to find it since I'm sure it's moving around," Bill sighed. "Maybe I can help?" Harry asked. Bill looked at him questioningly. "Hello," Harry said sarcastically. "Parseltongue. Snakes like to gossip about other snakes. If we gave them some food and promised more food if they gave us good information, we'd probably have the thing in a week." "That's not a bad idea," Bill said pensively. "Let's try it. Can I steal you away from family time this Sunday? We could pop over and try it out, see what we can find." "Yeah, sure. Anything for you, Bill. You're my big brother, after all," Harry said with a wink. "You're right about that. You're almost as much trouble as the twins. Welcome to being an honorary Weasley," Bill joked. They chatted for a few more minutes, then ended their call. Harry wondered if he'd need a jacket in Albania. Albus Dumbledore found himself to be a mastermind genius. Finding the Black House had been simple. Dumbledore had been to the home once before, and because it was not under a Fidelius charm, it was easy to locate again. There were wards on the home, but it had not been inhabited by any wizards for some time, so they were well degraded. Albus relatively easily found his way in through the back door. The only obstacle inside the house was a half-crazed, elderly house elf. Dumbledore meant to stun the poor thing, but it was resistant. A quick severing charm saw the little thing's head fall right off its shoulders. Albus noticed a line of house elf heads on the wall, so he attached the head so his deed would be less noticeable. A quick banishing charm on the rest of the remains and Dumbledore felt he was good to go. He wasn't sure exactly where to look for the locket. He hoped it was still in residence. The place looked pretty picked over. Little did Dumbledore know that Padfoot and Remus had gone through the home several times, removing anything of value. Padfoot's dream was to burn the place down. As soon as he finished cleansing all the dark artifacts from the place, Padfoot intended to do exactly that. Padfoot had no idea there was a Horcrux hidden inside the house. Dumbledore searched for hours with no luck. He was almost ready to give up, when he had an idea. The house elf. It was too late to ask the thing if it knew where the locket was located, but it wasn't too late to search the elf's hovel. Dumbledore searched all the closets in the house. He hit pay dirt when he searched the closet in the back of a storage room behind the kitchen. The door was small and barely came to Dumbledore's knees. It was hidden behind the broiler. Inside was a nest of old rags and ripped pillows. Under one of the pillows, Dumbledore found what he had been looking for, Slytherin's locket. He grinned to himself as he gingerly picked up the thing with one of the dank clothes that formed the nest. Dumbledore had learned his lesson about touching any of the Horcruxes. He slipped the locket into his pocket and left the residence quickly. A quick call to his phoenix, and Dumbledore was back in his office, lickety-split. Now all he needed to do was slip the locket to the Bones girl, and his next plan for bringing Tom Riddle and Harry Potter into contact with one another would be underway. The next morning at breakfast, Susan Bones received a package from a nondescript, brown barn owl. The package contained what was a truly ugly, gaudy necklace. Normally, the somewhat fashion-conscious Susan would never have worn the piece of jewelry. However, a well-placed compulsion charm had her slipping it over her neck without much thought. Once the necklace was on her neck, it had a will of its own to stay there. Dumbledore saw the girl slip the locket around her head and smiled. The game was on. Sunday rolled around and Harry Potter was preparing for another adventure. He was waiting patiently at Padfoot and Remus' travel trunk for his pseudo-big brother to arrive and take him to Albania. They were going snake hunting. Remus and Padfoot were planning to join the hunt. More wands were better when dealing with a potentially possessed snake. Bill arrived and the group was ready to head out to Gringotts to grab their international portkey. They arrived in Albania within the hour. Bill cast a summoning charm and a few snakes appeared. They were spitting mad about being disturbed, but Bill had a plan for that. He threw a couple of mice to each snake. Snakes are pretty food motivated, so they forgave him easily. "What are they saying, Harry?" Remus asked about the clump of hissing and spitting snakes. "They're still grumbling about being disturbed. Best throw a few more mice out there, Bill. They won't stick around for long unless you do." Bill complied. "Ask them about the snake. From the picture, it looked like an adder. It will probably be larger than normal. They usually grow about 80 centimeters long. I'd guess it's probably closer to 200 centimeters long. Stupid humans. I almost had a juicy rabbits," one snake complained. "I had just found a mate. Now, he'll be gone longs before I find my basking rock again," another snake griped. "They had better give Mesome more mice or I'll bite thems," another snake threatened. "Hey, guys," Harry hissed. The female snake sat up, affronted. And ladies," Harry quickly added. "Do you want some more food? We can get some rabbits SSSSS if you'll help USSSSSS." Harry said, trying to entice the snakes. They looked up, interested. "AS speaker," one snake hissed. "I've heard legends," the female snake hissed, "but I didn't believe thems." "Rabbits SS?" a third snake asked, only interested in more food. "Yes, rabbits," Harry promised. "Have you seen an adder that strange? It would be very large and very smart." The snakes all reared back and began hissing angrily. Quote, Harry looked at the other three wizards. "We're getting somewhere." He turned back to the snakes. "Yes, we will kills SSSSSS him. Do you know where he is?" The snakes whispered amongst themselves. A spokesperson spoke for the group. "Yes, we will show you his den if you give us US 3 juicy rabbits each," the snake said shrewdly. Harry turned to the wizards. "They said they'll show us the snake's den if we give them 3 juicy rabbits each." The wizards looked at each other. "Deal," said Bill. "He's been making enemies. He only eats other snakes and ate an entire nest of nestlings last year. Just goes to show, don't turn on your own, Padfoot said, thinking of Peter's fate. Too right, said Remus, thinking of the same. Harry turned back to the snakes. Deals. The snakes did a strange wiggling little dance. Rabbits first, said the spokesman. One now, two when you show us his dents, Harry negotiated. The snakes conferred. You only need us one of us to how you the den. Harry thought for a moment then agreed. I'll come with you to show the den, the others get their rabbits now. I get 4 rabbits when I show you the den and 1 rabbits now. Harry quickly agreed. Give this one, Harry said, pointing to the spoke snake, 1 rabbit now. He'll get 4 more after he shows us the den. The others get 3 now and then they get to leave. The other wizards agreed and began summoning rabbits. There were 6 snakes in total. The rabbit population of the woods was really going to take a hit. It was a feeding frenzy for a few minutes. Once the snakes had eaten their fill, most of them could barely slither to the surrounding rocks for basking. Harry ignored them and approached the spokesman snake, who also just happened to be the biggest. Harry put his arm down and let the snake crawl up on him. We will fly to the dens, he hissed at the snake. The wizards had all brought brooms. They didn't want to tip off the posed snake by letting it feel the vibrations of their approach. The wizards climbed on brooms and they were off. Harry was leading the pack. They slowly flew for around a half an hour with Harry and the snake in the lead. Harris, the snake shouted, pointing at a small cave. Harry slowed the broom to a stop. Here, Harry whispered, pointing at the cave. The 3 adult wizards landed softly and surrounded the cave. We'll smoke him out, Bill whispered. Bill, Padfoot, and Remus began casting smoke charms at the entrance. A few minutes later, a giant adder burst out of the opening of the cave. The wizards didn't hesitate. They all began casting blasting and severing charms at the beast without giving quarter. It only took a minute for the snake to explode into chunks. A horrid, unearthly scream filled the clearing. The snake on Harry's arm jumped in fright and almost fell to the ground. Harry's seeker skills saved it from a nasty fall. Thanks, the snake said, in relief. Don't mention ITSS, Harry responded. You can come down now, Harry, Remus called once Padfoot in dog form had verified the snake was truly dead. He might have chewed on the head for a moment, just to make sure. Harry landed and let the snake down onto the ground. It did the funny little snake dance again. Yes, the Manaki is dead, the snake said as it did the dance. Now, for my rabbits. Harry turned to Bill and asked him to give the snake his 4 rabbits. Bill happily complied, while Remus began to banish the pieces of snake carcass. Padfoot helped by eating some of the pieces. It grossed Harry out to see it. A few minutes later their business was done. 6 down, 1 to go. All we have left is the locket, Bill said happily. He showed the image of the locket to the other 3 wizards. Keep your eyes out for it. The only clue we have is this glass case and the number 12, Bill said in confusion. The other 3 wizards drew a blank but promised to keep thinking about it. With a quick portkey, they were back at Gringotts' London branch. Bill said goodbye to the other 3 and he. On Wednesday, Harry had herbology with the Hufflepuffs. He was in a particularly good mood. Hermione had given him another hug in the pool yesterday. It made Harry's day. It might make his week. He wasn't sure what was going on but he was finding his best friend more interesting all the time. Today, he was working with Susan Bones on repotting leaping toadstools. They were slippery things. It was easy to lose hold of them. That made it a fun assignment. Susan was a fun and friendly person. Harry was looking forward to working with her on the project. Unfortunately, Susan didn't seem to be herself today. Out of the way, she snarled at Neville Longbottom, whom she was usually very friendly with. She literally shoved Hannah Abbott, who was her best friend. She stared coldly at Harry when she reached his pot. Get the dirt, Potter, she hissed. She never called him Potter. Harry moved to get the dirt with his eyebrows raised. He didn't want to be jumped onto by the angry girl. They didn't talk while they worked. One toadstool leapt out of her hand. She caught it in midair and crushed it, growling all the while. Harry leapt back to avoid the splooge. What's gotten into you today? Harry asked Susan, concerned. Maybe being forced to work with half-bloods like you is my problem, Susan spat back at Harry. Harry was shocked. Susan had never cared about blood status before. She leaned over to pick up another pot of toadstools for repotting when the locket fell out of her robes. Harry recognized it immediately. It was too gaudy to miss. "Where did you get that locket?" Harry asked urgently. Susan shoved it back into her robes then shoved Harry. "None of your business, Potty. Do you get your kicks looking down girls' robes?" Harry didn't say anything but he was in a panic. Susan might already be possessed by the vile Horcrux. He had to get help. As soon as class was over, Harry hurried over to the lake and called Bill. He didn't care if he was late to his next class. It was history of magic, so no one would care, really. "Bill Weasley," Harry shouted at the mirror. It took a few minutes for Bill to answer. When he did, his face showed his concern. Harry could see a tomb in the background. Bill must have been working. "Harry, what's wrong? Shouldn't you be in class right now?" Bill asked, both concerned and chidingly. "I saw it, Bill. The locket. Susan Bones is wearing it. I think she's possessed." Bill looked shocked. "Susan Bones? How on earth did she get it?" "Stay away from her, Harry. I'll get there as soon as I can." With that, the call ended. Harry walked slowly to History of Magic. How did Susan end up with the locket? Bill didn't arrive until dinner time. He came bursting into the Great Hall followed by Madame Bones and 3 of her Aurors. Harry watched with interest as they approached Susan. Susan saw them coming and tried to run. Bill stunned her as Madame Bones screamed. "Don't hurt her." Susan fell to the floor but was relatively unscathed. Madame Bones began casting spells on her and gasped. "Get that necklace off of her. It's dark magic." Bill moved to do the removal. He used a magic null bag to grip the thing then slipped it inside. Dumbledore came hurrying over. The success of his plan was all he could think of. "What's the meaning of this?" "Unhand my student," he said, commandingly. He couldn't let them find the locket. "Your student? I think you mean my niece," Madame Bones said snidely in return. She gently turned Susan over onto her back. The Aurors had theirs wands out, pointed at Dumbledore. Dumbledore noticed the locket was missing. "Where's the locket?" he blurted out before he could think better of it. He winced. He hoped no one had caught what he'd said. It was not his lucky day. Both Bill and Madame Bones had heard him, as had half the Great Hall. "How did you know about the locket?" Madame Bones asked viciously. Bill had his wand out now, too. He was behind Dumbledore. Dumbledore tried to play innocent. "What locket? You're under arrest for suspicion of using dark artifacts on a minor," Madame Bones bellowed. The Aurors tried to take Dumbledore into custody but he was still a match for them. He had his wand out in his left hand before they could take a single step. Unfortunately for Dumbledore, Bill shot him in the back with a stunner before he could start casting spells. Dumbledore fell forward onto his large conch with a crack. Bill winced at the sound of breaking bone. The Aurors rushed forward and slapped one magic suppression cuff to Dumbledore's only remaining wrist and removed his wand. They floated the man out of the Great Hall and disappeared. Madame Bones floated Susan up and looked to the head table. "Poppy, can you come check her, please?" Madame Bones asked calmly. She was a seasoned officer of the law. She would not panic. Poppy hurried over to follow Madame Bones to the hospital wing. Bill put his wand away. He went to speak with Professor McGonagall, then turned back to the students. "Everyone," Professor McGonagall said as she stood, "please finish your dinner and return to your common rooms." The students turned back to their food and began to gossip, mightily. None of them knew what was going on but it was exciting news anyway. Bill went over to the Gryffindor table and sat between Harry and Ron. The twins and Percy came over to see what was happening. Ginny hurried over, too. She didn't want to miss anything. "Did you get it?" Harry asked urgently. Bill nodded, then tried to change the subject. "How's classes?" Ginny squawked in indignation. "You want to talk about classes? The headmaster was just arrested." "What happened?" Ginny asked loudly. "Not here," Bill said. "Let's go to Harry's trunk." The students were too excited to hear the news to keep eating. They all jumped up to follow Bill out of the hall. Even Ron only grabbed a few rolls, shoved them full of meat and cheese quickly, and followed the group. They made their way quickly to Gryffindor Tower and up to Harry's dorm room. In just a minute, they were in Harry's trunk. They all sat down around the kitchen table, where Twinkie provided some nibblies and tea. "Talk," Ginny said imperiously. "I'm not sure what the headmaster has to do with anything but Susan Bones was possessed by a dark artifact. Harry here spotted it this morning and told me." I got Madam Bones and came here as soon as I could, Bill revealed. What sort of dark artifact? Percy asked. A dangerous one, Bill said seriously. It sounded like the headmaster might have given it to her. Or at least knew she had it. Fred and George said, finishing one another's sentences. It looked like, Harry agreed. I'll be very interested to hear his part in all this, Bill said. His suspicion was that the twins were correct. Dumbledore must know about the Horcruxes. First, he had the ring. Then, the locket appeared right under his nose and apparently with his knowledge. Bill was feeling very suspicious of the man, indeed. Will Susan be okay? Asked Hermione. Bill sighed. I hope so. I think she will be, once the item is cleansed of dark magic. I plan to take care of it tonight. Why you? Asked Ron. Because I'm an expert cursebreaker, punk, Bill said in reply. Ron laughed. Oh yeah, I forget that sometimes. Bill shook his head. They group talked for a few more minutes before they trundled out of Harry's trunk. They walked Bill down to the door of the common room together and said their goodbyes. Bill didn't want to give away Harry's flow capabilities to Percy. He loved the kid, but he knew he was definitely the type to tattle. 2 weeks later was the date set for Albus Dumbledore's trial. He had refused to answer any questions while in custody. Amelia Bones knew she would have to use Veritaserum to get any answers out of the old coot, but she also knew she'd only get permission to use it during a full trial. She was determined to get answers about how her niece had come into possession of such a dangerous and deadly dark artifact. Bill got permission for Harry to attend the trial. They sat in the front row behind Ted Tonks, who was hired as the special prosecutor for the trial. He had had to pull several strings and call in favors to get the job. He was determined to get answers out of the old codger. Dumbledore played games with the lives and well-being of children, and Ted would see him held accountable. Dumbledore was brought out and set into the defendant's chair. The chains rattled but didn't wrap around him. They were intent-based and would only chain someone to the chair if they had the intent to flee or if they were ordered to do so by the head of the DMLE. Madam Bones had to recuse herself from acting as prosecutor because she had a conflict of interest. She felt confident that Ted would do a good job trying the case. She sat merely as a voting member of the Wizengamot, instead of in her role as head of the DMLE. All rise, the Honorable Griselda Marchbanks presiding, as Chief Witch of the Wizengamot, the bailiff called. Everyone stood while Griselda slowly made her way into the chamber. You may be seated, the bailiff called. We are here today to try the case against Albus Dumbledore, who is accused of knowingly using, or allowing to be used, a dark artifact on a minor child under his care. Mr. Tonks, please present your case. Thank you, Madam Marchbanks. We are here today because a vaunted headmaster abused his authority by allowing a dark artifact to enter the possession of a child under his care. Albus Dumbledore allowed an accursed locket, known as Slytherin's locket, to enter the possession of Susan Bones, a Hogwarts student. The locket was a Horcrux, a dark magic soul shard olfactory, infected with a soul piece from an evil wizard. Everyone gasped at this piece of news, including Dumbledore. He didn't expect them to find out what type of dark magic had been infecting the locket. At least they didn't seem to know the soul piece belonged to Voldemort. Susan Bones was possessed by the soul shard. She received extensive magical damage and remains in St. Mungo's to this day. While she is expected to recover, she has experienced a significant ordeal that caused her great pain and suffering. She is only 13 years old. The audience and the Wizengamot members became restless at this statement. Children were held as sacred in the wizarding world. Harm to one of the young was considered a heinous crime. Albus Dumbledore was heard asking after the locket prior to the item becoming general knowledge in front of Madam Bones and 3 Aurors, Bill Weasley, whom we will hear from later, and in front of the entire student body. Albus Dumbledore had no way of knowing that the locket was the dark artifact possessing Susan Bones, unless he had prior knowledge of Susan's possession of the artifact. Our case will show that Albus Dumbledore knowingly allowed the item to enter Hogwarts and to fall into the possession of Susan Bones. He did nothing to help this poor child and instead allowed her to be harmed for reasons unknown. Thank you, Mr. Tonks. Mr. Dumbledore, please give your opening statement, said Griselda. Ladies and gentlemen of the Wizengamot, friends and colleagues. I am but one man overseeing over 1,000 students. The school wards should have alerted me to the entrance of such a dark artifact onto the school grounds, yet they did not. There are over 500 rooms in Hogwarts Castle. Rooms filled with secrets even I do not know. It is possible the locket in question, an artifact known as Slytherin's locket, has been in residence within Hogwarts walls since the time of the founders. I am deeply saddened by the harm that came to Susan Bones, but my case will show I had no foreknowledge of Susan's possession of such a dark artifact, which seems to have appeared from parts unknown. Since Susan is unable to be with us here today, we might never know how she obtained the artifact. This is a sad fact that we will all have to accept. But there is light at the end of this dark tunnel. The artifact has been destroyed and Susan will recover. That is what we should be focused upon rather than this absurd attempt to cast blame where there is none. Thank you, Mr. Dumbledore. Prosecution, call your first witness. The prosecution calls Bill Weasley to the stand. Bill approached the witness stand and took a seat. Will you submit to questioning under Veritaserum? Yes, I will. The Veritaserum was administered. Could you tell us your expert opinion about the type of dark magic involved in the locket? Certainly, I did several tests, of which I have a copy here. Bill gave a copy of the test results to Ted. Ted waved his wand and distributed copies to all the Wizengamot members. He also blew up a copy and attached it to the wall for everyone to see. As you can see, the results showed a level 29 dark attachment to the locket. Items in this category are determined to be dark soul magic. I further performed the test below. It showed the item to be a Horcrux. Can you explain to us what a Horcrux is? Ted asked. Bill replied, a Horcrux occurs when a wizard commits the willful murder of an innocent. The murder, when combined with a specific ritual, causes the soul of the caster to shatter. The soul piece that has broken off from the whole can then be placed in an olfactory for storage. And what is the purpose of a soul olfactory? The soul piece will anchor the dark wizard to this realm of existence after they die. They can then be resurrected with a necromantic ritual designed for that purpose. Can you tell who the soul piece belongs to from the tests you performed? No, I cannot. Bill of course knew exactly who the soul piece belonged to, however, he did not come to that conclusion via the tests he performed. Ted had decided they would keep that information to themselves. People might not believe or want to believe that Lord Voldemort could return. This could seriously damage their case. Thank you, Bill. Finally, could you tell us what you saw and heard from Albus Dumbledore in relation to the locket today? Bill told the story from beginning to end, starting with when Harry contacted him and ending with Dumbledore asking about the locket when he should have had no knowledge of it. Mr. Dumbledore's witness, Ted said to the court. Mr. Dumbledore, would you like to cross-examine the witness? No, I have no questions for Bill. Thank you, Griselda, Dumbledore said with a twinkle in his eye. He was relying on his own testimony to save him. Next, I'd like to call Amelia Bones to the stand, Ted said to Madame Marchbanks. You are dismissed, Mr. Weasley. Amelia Bones, please come to the witness stand, Griselda said, officiously. Madame Bones, would you submit to questioning under Veritaserum? Yes, I will. The Veritaserum was administered. You took sworn testimony from your niece about how she acquired the locket, did you not? Yes, I did. Could you tell us about the testimony you obtained? Dumbledore objected. I object to this testimony on the grounds of hearsay. Susan Bones should be present to give her own testimony. She chose not to do so. Ted responded. Madame Bones is an officer of the law. She took testimony under the procedures dictated by the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. He turned to Madame Bones. Was Susan's testimony taken under the influence of Veritaserum? Yes, it was. Further, Susan did not choose not to attend these proceedings. She is still under the care of healer Gershaw in St. Mungo's, where she is attempting to heal from her trying ordeal. Madame Bones gave Dumbledore a vicious look. I'll allow it, Griselda ruled. Please proceed, Mr. Tonks. Madame Bones provided a copy of the written and signed testimony from Susan while she was in her hospital bed. Ted distributed the copies. Please share the testimony with us. Madame Bones told the story exactly as it had been given to her by Susan. Ted turned to the members of the Wizengamot. As you can see, someone intentionally provided the locket to Susan. They either knew, or should have known, this accursed locket would cause Susan great harm. The person used a Hogwarts school owl to complete the delivery, and therefore must have been on the Hogwarts grounds. In your expert opinion, would you agree with this assessment, Madame Bones? Yes, I would. Thank you. Mr. Dumbledore, your witness. Madam Bones, even if a Hogwarts school owl was utilized, and I highly doubt we can claim a nondescript, brown barn owl was Hogwarts' own, isn't it true anyone who was on the Hogwarts grounds could have sent the owl? Madam Bones gave Dumbledore a vicious smirk. I didn't state the owl was a nondescript brown barn owl during my testimony. However, you have accurately described the owl as Susan described it to me. Dumbledore froze. He hadn't really been listening during Madam Bones' testimony. He already knew what she was going to say. He'd been planning his own testimony instead. He snapped himself out of it. Could you please answer the question? Yes, anyone on the Hogwarts ground could have sent the package. Thank you, no further questions, Dumbledore said. He didn't show it on the outside but he was flustered. Next, I'd like to call Harry Potter to the stand, Ted replied. Harry approached the stand. Would you be willing to submit to questioning under Veritaserum? Yes, I would. Dumbledore objected. Harry Potter does not have permission from his magical guardian to submit himself to questioning under Veritaserum. As his magical guardian, I am afraid I will have to deny the request. He tried not to sound smug but he failed. Ted piped up, actually, I have signed, written permission from Harry Potter's guardian, stating he may submit to questioning under Veritaserum, Ted said, providing a copy of the permission form to Madame Marchbanks. Harry's guardian is a muggle, and therefore inappropriate to provide permission, Dumbledore countered. Actually, this form states Mr. Bill Weasley is Harry's physical and magical guardian, Griselda replied. That's impossible, Dumbledore responded, becoming angry. I have been acting as Harry's magical guardian since I took possession of the boy after his parents' death. Ted popped in, acting as the key phrase there. You never had any legal authority to act as anything to Harry, nor did you have any authority to take possession of him, as you call it. I am Albus Dumbledore, he said imperiously. I am the chief warlock of the Wizengamot, chief mugwump of the ICW, and headmaster of Hogwarts. And none of that gave you authority to kidnap a child. I have here a copy of the Potter's wills, a copy of the form signed by Harry's relatives giving Bill Weasley custody of Harry, and a copy of the signed and ministry-approved document granting magical and physical custody of Harry Potter to Bill Weasley, per the precepts in his parents' wills. Ted provided the copies to Madame Marchbanks. Dumbledore was stunned. How had they gotten a copy of the Potter's wills? Dumbledore had sealed the copies in the ministry himself. No one could open them but himself. How did you get a copy of the Potter's wills? Dumbledore asked, dumbfounded. From the Gobbins, I believe, Ted said, in triumph. Further, Ted continued, Albus Dumbledore did not do his duty as guardian. He did not check in on Harry, who was knowingly left with magic-hating muggles. Harry was starved, beaten, locked in a cupboard, and locked in a room with bars on the windows and locks on the door. Andromeda Tonks stood up. I can attest to these allegations. Harry was brought to me upon Bill gaining guardianship. I have a copy of my healer's report right here. She gave the copy to Ted, who distributed copies to the Wizengamot. This all looks to be in order, Griselda said, after reviewing the documents. She had noticed Dumbledore's signature as a witness to the Potter's wills and felt it was bad form for him to try to go against the Potter's wishes. She couldn't believe he'd been so derelict in his duty to the boy. Such treatment of a magical child was shameful. I'll allow the testimony. Dumbledore was visibly fuming. He had lost control of Harry in a very public way. There would be no easy way to undo this mess with a few well-placed memory and banishing charms. Everyone had heard the evidence and the court had pronounced Bill Harry's guardian. Worse, everyone now knew he'd allowed the boy to be abused. It was for the greater good but the general public would never understand that. His reputation would be in tatters. The Veritaserum was administered. Harry, could you tell us about how you discovered the necklace? Harry told the story of Susan's strange behavior in class. He followed up with how he saw the necklace and about how he'd contacted Bill. He didn't mention he had been on the lookout for the Horcrux, but then again, Ted didn't ask. Can you tell us about what you saw in the Great Hall when Bill and Madame Bones arrived? Harry told about the scene of Susan's capture and the removal of the locket. He explained that Bill had placed the locket in a magic null bag and then into his pocket, well before Dumbledore arrived on the scene. Finally, he recounted Dumbledore's behavior and comments about the necklace. Your witness, Dumbledore, Ted said, with venom. Dumbledore decided to use the opportunity to try to repair his reputation, rather than ask about the locket. Harry, come now. Tell everyone that it wasn't so bad with your relatives. They did the best they could by you, didn't they? If you call barely feeding me, dressing me in my fat cousin's rags, and locking me in a small, dark place for most of my childhood while expecting me to do all the chores and ignoring the way their son beat me not that bad, Harry said, glaring at the headmaster. Certainly beating is too harsh of a word. You turned out well, didn't you? Dumbledore cajoled. Dudley Dursley, my cousin, and his friends broke my ribs multiple times while kicking me. They almost drowned me in a toilet by holding my head inside until I passed out. You can look at the report yourself. It shows all of it. I did turn out well, but it was in spite of my family, not because of them. The crowd in the Wizengamot seats began muttering mutinously as they read the healer's report. It was all right there. The boy was abused and neglected. There was no denying that. Dumbledore was desperate. He decided to try another tact. I'd like Harry's entire testimony stricken from the record and bound so no one can speak of it again. The boy is a Horcrux. He's been possessed and that's why he can lie under Veritaserum. The crowd gasped. Ted grinned. Dumbledore had messed up now. How would you know he's a Horcrux, Dumbledore? Dumbledore stood up imperiously, because I tested him myself when he was a baby. He's been a Horcrux since the night Voldemort attacked his family. The crowd flinched and cried out in fear from the name being spoken. Then, they began to grumble angrily. Fudge went beet red, stood up, and yelled. You lie, Dumbledore. Voldemort doesn't have a Horcrux. He's dead and gone. There's no way he can come back. You're loony as a bat. Or, you're trying to steal my job. I won't have it, Fudge said, slamming his fist down on the railing. The crowd angrily grumbled their agreement. None of them could accept that Voldemort could come back. It was beyond comprehension. Test him, Ted said to the unspeakables in the third row. They looked to Madame Marchbanks, who nodded. The unspeakables moved to Harry and began casting spells. After a few moments, they stopped and shook their heads. He's no Horcrux, Saul Croaker, the head unspeakable, stated. What? Dumbledore shouted. He rushed over and began casting his own spells. He stopped, his mouth hanging open in shock. How can this be? Ted spoke. I have no more questions for Harry. It seems Dumbledore is done creating a mockery of this court. I suggest we dismiss the witness and put Albus Dumbledore on the stand. He has much to answer for. Harry, you're dismissed, Griselda said to the calm young man. Harry was gleeful on the inside. Dumbledore was certainly getting his. Albus Dumbledore, please take the stand, Griselda said in a no-nonsense tone of voice. She'd like to hear the man explain himself as well. Dumbledore looked around and realized his goose was cooked. He had to get out of there before he ended up in Azkaban. Fox, he called out. The Phoenix appeared. He looked at Dumbledore and shook his head. He flew over and perched on Harry's shoulder instead. The bird was tired of the machinations of his master. He had only stayed so long to help protect the chicks in the school. He felt his master was losing his marbles and felt it was time to move on. He'd stay loyal to the school, not to the man, as he had done for over 1,000 years. Dumbledore starred, slack-jawed. That wasted few precious seconds would be his undoing. The Aurors were on him in a second. They removed his wand and shoved him into the defendant's chair. This time, the chains did wrap around him. He had already attempted to escape once and had the intent to try again. At the direction of Madame Marchbanks, they forced Veritaserum down his throat. He sang like the proverbial bird about all he'd done for the next hour or so. He admitted to everything. To sending the locket to Susan, to allowing Harry to be abused, to stealing, and lying, and being Gellert Grindelwald's partner in every sense of the word. Not that being gay was a crime, but being in league with a Dark Lord and possibly killing his own sister certainly was. The Wizengamot members conferred for a mere half an hour before they came back with a guilty verdict. Ted wasn't done with his humiliation yet. He had plans for Dumbledore's punishment. Your Honor, if it would please the court, we ask for alternative sentencing in this case. We cannot forget the good Albus Dumbledore did during his life, nor his advanced age, in his sentencing. The prosecution asks that Albus Dumbledore's magic be bound like a child who refused to come to Hogwarts. We suggest his wand be broken and his wealth be confiscated to pay reparations to his victims. Finally, we suggest that he be placed in a Muggle care home for the remainder of his days." Ted grinned viciously at the suggestions. He loved being a bloodthirsty lawyer. All agreed. Griselda asked the Wizengamot. Almost all the wands in the room lit up. "So it is adjudged. We accept your suggestion for sentencing. Case closed." She smacked her gavel down on the bench and Dumbledore was dragged away. Epilogue. June 3, 1994. Today was the last day of Harry Potter's third year at Hogwarts. He had just one last event to attend, then he would be off to Hogsmeade. He decided not to ride the train back this year. There was no point, since he'd be moving to the Potterlands in Hogsmeade along with Remus, Padfoot, Twinkie, and Dobby. Their family would live together in their travel trunks as they had the year before. Harry just had the Hogwarts graduation ceremony to attend with Remus, Padfoot, and the Weasleys before he would get to go home. Hagrid had passed his owls in the 6 core subjects in Care of Magical. He got an A in each of the core subjects and an O+ in Care. The man was ecstatic at his achievement. Charlie Weasley, along with a glowing recommendation from Newt Scamander, meant Hagrid's dream of working on the Dragon Sanctuary was becoming a reality. Harry and his friends had a peaceful remainder of their school year. They had fun and they worked hard, but they weren't ever in danger. McGonagall was an excellent headmistress and began making improvements right away. She fired Binns and hired a reputable, fun teacher for history of magic. She found a new, competent teacher for defense against the dark arts, or as it was now called, defensive magics. She even helped Snape out. He now only taught Newt-level students and spent the rest of his time working on research that the school would gain 50% ownership of. It turned out to be a very profitable endeavor. At dinner the evening before, the school had been presented with the new brooms and a 300,000 galleon cash donation that Harry had planned from the Basilisk proceeds. All the Quidditch teams now had Nimbus 2001s, and not just the Slytherins. The school had a complete new set of clean sweep 10s for use for the flying classes and for the kids to use for fun. Kids had been jumping up and down, crying and laughing. It was a sight to behold. Harry stood in his room, looking for his cufflinks. Dress robes were encouraged for the graduation ceremony. He picked his invisibility cloak up off the floor to look under it. Then, Harry looked in his bottom bedside table drawer to look for them. He was surprised to see the ring and Dumbledore's old wand. He held them both in one hand and held his cloak up with the other. He remembered all the trouble Voldemort had wrought in his life and was seriously thankful it was over. "I'm so glad he's truly dead." Harry was surprised to feel all 3 items heat up and glow for just a moment. He shrugged it off and stuffed all 3 items back into the drawer. Somewhere in Little Hangleton, a wraith that had been floating up through a graveyard towards a house called Riddle Manor suddenly solidified into a ghost. Now, the man called Tom Marvolo Riddle, also known as Lord Voldemort, would haunt those places forever. Harry didn't know this, though. All he knew was he felt suddenly free. He raced to finish getting ready and ran to meet his family to watch Hagrid and Percy Weasley graduate. The end. I hope you enjoyed this story. Also remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.